So, good morning. Can you hear me? Great. So, I will speak a bit louder so everybody in this exhibition hall can hear me. So, please come to theater number 7 for a Fintech session. We will start right now. So, okay. Thank you very much for hosting us here today at the European Utility Week. We are planning to present you some short introductions from the legal, operational and technical perspective about fintech solutions. And fintech solutions are not limited to certain areas like blockchain, but it's rather open-ended and open-minded. So if you want to come to us here to discuss any kind of issue related to fintech, like smart contracts, blockchain, and whatsoever, network technologies, you're welcomed. What I will do now, I will introduce the participants, the panelists to you, and last not least also myself. So I will start with a lady on the panel here. So please take the micro and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Okay, it's done. Hi, so good morning. My name is Bibiane Kaufmann. I work at the Department for Integrated Supervision at the Financial Market Authority in Austria. And in that department we established a Fintech contact point. So I am in charge of Fintech issues and issues of non-licensed companies. And I am a legal counsel at the Financial Market Authority.
Yeah, thank you. And for the auditors, if you would like to take a micro, or if you cannot hear very well what we say, you can take also a micro. Yeah. So please, Thilo, go ahead with the introduction.
Yes, good morning. My name is Thilo Zimmermann. I'm managing director and co-founder of Ponton. We're a software company based in Hamburg, Germany. In fact, our stand is just over there, so if you want to see us later, come over. And I think the main reason I got invited here is our project Enerchain, which is the largest blockchain-based energy trading infrastructure, I suppose, even in the world, but certainly in Europe.
Yeah, thank you. So now we'll hand over to my colleague, who's from RWE. We don't have a stand here, but we are participating in this event, I think, since, 10 years now, formerly eMart, and eMart was integrated here into this event, and I think that's not the first time we are here anyway. So, Matthias, you're online.
Yeah, so Matthias Fleck, I'm working in the legal department of the trading house of RWE, and also as a trading house, of course, we are interested in fintech solutions, in digitization, and on top we are engaged in EFED, so the Energy Trader Federation, and there has been established a working group on these kind of solutions, just to really build up knowledge in this area, also for energy trading, and I'm involved in that working group as well.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the one hiding behind the desk here. My name is Clemens Wagner-Bruschek. I'm Deputy Director of the Economics Division of E-Control, the Austrian Regulatory Authority for Natural Gas and Electricity. We are the data hub of our authority and taking care of market surveillance on the remit and doing quantitative modeling, and among other things we are also dealing with certain digitalization topics like blockchain, DLT in the energy sector.
Yeah, and I mean, my name is Karl-Peter Horstmann. I'm working as RWE as well. We are interested with technology because there is some relevance for our sector, and I propose that, yeah, Clemens, you go ahead with your presentation, and then we can have a Q&A on that presentation. Then the others will also have a short presentation, and then we hopefully get some interaction with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me start my presentation, which is not yet on a blockchain. Oh yeah, here we go. So I was asked to share some thoughts on fintech regulation from a regulatory perspective. So probably just to begin with, some of you might not be aware of a very, very important voting and election process which is currently running in Austria. probably not even all Austrians, we are currently voting for the word and the non-word of the year 2018. And over the last month, I've been preparing several talks on digitalization, on blockchain, fintech, and whatever you may call the new technological developments. And I was wondering myself, should I vote for digitalization as a word of the year 2018 or a non-word? Should you do the same with blockchain? Anyway, I did not participate in the pre-election process, but currently now 10 candidates have been selected, and digitalization is a candidate for the word 2018. Now, when I was preparing my talk here, I was wondering, digitalization, fintech, insurtech, govtech, whatsoever, what do they actually mean? And if you go into to an online dictionary, go to Wikipedia, whatever, and start searching for those keywords and what is actually the meaning of those, for digitalization, very interesting, you get loads of pages declaring what digitalization means. It starts very simple with taking analog data and making it digital, discretizing it, preparing it in a digital form available for technological analysis. The next step was you could use optimization, you can introduce autonomization, you can use automation. Everything still under the keyword of, or buzzword of digitalization. And that has been a word which was in the market for many, many decades. That's nothing recent. Still, it's a candidate for the word 2018. And one of the later parts, AI, big data, regtech, insurtech. Just look, you have govtech, you have even churchtech. And one of those buzzwords, again, fintech. So what do I want to say with this is, we're talking today about fintech, but when I talk about what are we as a regulator doing to keep track of fintech solutions, I would rather interpret it in a more broader perspective. What are we taking to keep track of technological innovation, if you want to call it digitalization? So let me start with a simple question first. Why should we as regulators even care about fintech? Isn't it something the market should do? Isn't it probably even something financial-wise the energy market regulator involved? Now, in principle, as a regulator, you take several roles. Two of the most important ones are, first of all, a regulator is a company. We have our company goals, our objectives. They are not monetary oriented as your goals as market participants, but we have certain regulatory goals we strive to achieve. So, in fulfilling, in reaching our regulatory goals, technological innovation, big data analysis, AI, machine learning, blockchain whatsoever can help us achieve those goals in an efficient and effective way. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at fintech solutions. The second part is regulators as rule makers, and it's very important. I explicitly say rule maker. We are not the policy maker, at least as e-control. We are allowed to set rules in a specified framework, and the framework which is specified by the policymakers, by the ministries, by the commission and so on. But within those boundaries, we can make rules and we can enforce certain rules. And to be able to enforce those rules in a modern market, we need to keep track of fintech solutions. Since we need to be educated contact partners for the industry. And second, when we think about a new market design, for example, a new decentralized energy market, we should be aware of the technological solutions that are available to enable these modern market designs. Now, when we are actually trying to implement or to understand those fintech solutions, we are faced with several challenges. One of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure all of you share this challenge, is efficient knowledge management. It's already the first question. Which technological development should I follow? 2 or 3 years ago, we started investigating blockchain. At that point of time, we had to judge, basically, is blockchain worth having a look at, or should we skip it? So that's a big question. And once you've identified those technologies that are relevant for you, you have to find out more about them. You have to learn to understand them. And I think most of you have shared the experience over the last 2 years learning about blockchain. That was quite tricky. There was lots of promotion, there was a big hype. People were claiming blockchain is the holy grail, it's the stone of Rosette, whatsoever, but it was very difficult to get actual valid information about the technology. So knowledge management. And an important key to identifying the correct technologies to follow and to actually gain the knowledge we need is to have proper, dynamic and smart people that are working for your company. Second issue. Speed of development. Now that's really critical, but it depends a bit how big the danger is basically to be left behind depends on the kind of question or the kind of decision you have to take. For example, if you employ a technology, a new technology in a setting which is from a regulatory point of view already well known, well understood, okay, then it's probably simpler question of judging, does it fit into the current regulatory framework? If yes, how should we allocate it within this framework? It gets a bit more tricky when you tackle questions of big market design. Yeah? If we want to set up our current energy market in a more decentralized way, then this is a huge decision. That's a decision which can, in general, not be taken by one regulatory authority, not even on a national level. That's something we have to take care of on a European level. So this definitely makes the time it takes until we come to a conclusion, until we reach decisions, tremendously longer. The danger of being too late, that's something important. If we think about the technological innovations in the, let's say, in the housing sector or in the private transport sector, you all know the companies that came from Asia, from the USA, that started these kind of new systems in the hotel sector, for example, in Europe. And they've been acting, at least in some parts, in kind of a gray area as regards regulation. And now they are in some way the market leader with big legal discussions on whether they're valid or not, whether they're compliant or not. This is something we as a regulator should be aware of. That can happen in the energy sector as well. Yeah? And we should act in time to prevent any damage our markets can take. Thank you. If we judge now new technologies from a regulatory perspective, we should take into account our well-known and well-funded regulatory principles and probably give them a future-oriented touch. We should definitely be, in our judgment, technology and business model neutral. In principle, if we go for a decentralized energy market and blockchain can enable it from a technological perspective, it's fine. But we should not, as regulators, say it has to be blockchain. It can be, I don't know, Hashgraph, IOTA, it can be a traditional database. We should not care. We are about to set the rules, to set the qualification criteria probably for the solution, but what the actual solution is should be decided by the market. Of course, regulatory objectives, sustainability of the energy markets, competition in the market, security of supply, affordability of energy for the end consumers, all those regulatory objectives must be met anyway. Standardization and harmonization. Even nowadays with solutions like blockchain, the question, how should the data look like that we put onto the blockchain? Yeah, it should be probably standardized across the markets to increase efficiency. These are all questions which are still valid in this new setting. Clarity and stability, that's something tricky in this fast-paced world of technological development. You want rules which stick for a certain time, basically to ensure that your investments are safe, at least from a regulatory perspective. On the other hand, technological developments are getting faster and faster. You need to take account of that. And finally, an issue which is quite important for myself, our rules and regulations should be problem-related. So lots of people came to me over the last 2 years claiming we need a blockchain regulation in the energy market. That's not the issue. When they said they could not set up a peer-to-peer trading system on blockchain, for example, it was not a question of blockchain or not blockchain. It was a question of how can we set up a peer-to-peer trading system in an energy market with balance group, where you have to register as a supplier probably with national ministries, where you have to provide general terms and conditions whenever you supply someone. And if we two are trading energy with each other, then I'm supplying you and you're supplying me. You have this role. So it's rather a question of the market design with peer-to-peer trading and not about the technology. Look at the peer-to-peer trading solutions we see out there nowadays in Spain and Germany. They are working perfectly fine in the current setting because they have used some utility as a kind of umbrella regulatory entity. The question is this the kind of market design we want? And finally, one last challenge I see, that's the increasing dependence of sectors. And I think our panel reflects it to a certain degree. I'm standing here as an energy market regulator, but if you look at these modern solutions, let's say blockchain solutions where a token, this virtual representation of potentially some asset, of some energy whatsoever, it has a meaning in the energy market regulation, but it also potentially affects financial market regulation, or is affected by financial market regulation. And the same I see happening in the energy market across various other sectors. There are questions of data protection, there are questions of from the transport sector popping up. So lots of regulatory areas, and it's a great challenge, not just for you as market participants, but also for us as the rule makers to properly take into account our co-regulators' work. All right, probably a few words. How do we now actually try to meet those challenges? I mean, knowledge management, as I said, you need eager people, you need smart people. They need to watch the news, go to conferences, interact with market participants, just as I do today in this panel, in order to explore what is going on and what is worth pursuing. Concerning the timing, it's very important if there's someone coming to you and say, yeah, what is your interpretation or what is the regulator's take on a specific project, then it's important to decide quickly, is it a question we can address or is it something we have to move on a European level? Do this quickly and also provide knowledge to those who are finally taking the decisions. The integration of the market, again, this is a monitoring topic. You need to take a good look at what is happening in the financial market, which might have an effect on applications in the energy market. You have to take into account what is done concerning decarbonization, what is done on the transport sector, fostering development of LNG, of electricity, whatsoever in the mobility sector. Everything has an impact on the energy regulation. And finally, assessing those technologies according to those future-oriented regulatory principles. Now that's simply, we to a certain degree can take decisions, but we also have to transfer the knowledge we as a regulators attain to the respective decision makers. And as I already mentioned in the case of peer-to-peer trading, you have to take the project, abstract it, what is actually the regulatory, the policy question at hand, simplify to that, and then feed that to the responsive authorities. And concerning probably how shall we step forward, lots of NRAs and also CERS, or the Council of European Energy Regulators, they are taking digitalization topics, including fintech as one of the key topics for the future strategy. So there is, for example, the 3D strategy of CER you might have heard of, which is currently kicking off, and I hope this is a great challenge for regulators and market participants alike to continue our discussions on what the future market design will look like in view of the digital developments. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I propose that we have a Q&A session now, and the purpose of the setting is here that we have here a cube, and we do a little bit of sport. So someone who wants to ask a question gets the cube, and then the next one gets the cube as well, and you throw the cube to each other. Yeah. So a bit of fun and sports in the morning. So is there anybody who dares to ask the question? Otherwise I will start and then I will come just after you. And no? Okay, Clemens, I start a little bit, okay, to warm up. You are the Austrian energy regulator, and actually it's an excellent presentation. Yeah, thank you very much for it. However, it's still a bit abstract. So can you maybe give some practical examples of fintech startups and whatsoever, besides the one who sits here, Enerchain, or that's we have in a minute. But yeah, do you have any? Can you share any experience, regulatory experience? I mean,
sure. So actually, we got addressed by several startups, and they asked us to join their project. It's not a regulator's part to actively join a project, yeah. But we offered some kind of advisory role, just as we offer this advisory role to all market participants if they have questions concerning regulation, especially in the Austrian sector. Concerning the topics or the kind of projects they were envisaging. So that's basically peer-to-peer trading. So that was a big question. How can we implement some peer-to-peer trading system in Austria, for example, or across the Union? Topic number one, which usually led to a discussion of should prosumers pay any network tariffs? So that's the big question of how much money should they spend. Second topic is guarantees of origin. In principle, because those two cases, peer-to-peer trading and guarantees of origin, I think are the standard examples for blockchain technology, yeah, because both are faced with the question of double spending, and blockchain technology is well suited to address that. And finally, probably a bit exotic for the Austrian market, but I think in the UK already startups are working with that, the question of supplier switching platforms. So as you can imagine, or all of you know, you can switch your supplier in regular intervals. And the platforms we're using now are traditional database platforms. They are sometimes a bit slow. There's still lots of alignment between involved parties necessary, and blockchain technology could, for example, facilitate or ease that process. Especially in case we should ever go to a peer-to-peer trading system, at least if the rules stay as they are, something like supplier switching within minutes will be required. So those were, at least from a content perspective, the cases of the startups that they provided to us. Probably a few words on, let's call it the educational level. So we've been addressed by some utilities, which was fine because they're experts in the energy market. But the startups, most of the time, are not that well educated in energy regulation or even in the setup of the energy markets. And that was a bit of a challenge to kind of teach them the basic ideas or the fundamentals of our current energy market, from a physical side, but also from a regulatory perspective. And I still remember a panel 2 years ago in Germany, Cologne, when one of those startups said, yeah, we need definitely free consultancy by energy regulators, because we all have the same goal. We want to destroy the big former incumbents, which is basically showed a stark misunderstanding of the energy regulator's role. It's not our desire in any way to destroy good old utilities. We just want to foster competition. But so you see, startups are eager to enter the market, but lack often, not always, often a bit of an understanding of how things should work.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clemens. Is there anybody here from a utility in Europe or elsewhere? I mean, it would just be interesting what kind of people are sitting here. So you're from a utility? Yeah, I give you a micro. So please, sorry. So from which?
My name is Jim from Tenaga Nasional Berhad, which is in Malaysia, utility in Malaysia. So I just have a question. There was one slide that you showed the regulators function, but I do not understand the word in the center because I think it's in German. House.
Oh, challenges.
Oh, sorry. Oh, the word is challenge?
Was it in German?
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
Oops.
Okay, one thing I know from the utility point of view, and I think it's a constant and it's the same everywhere else, whereas mostly the utilities are always in front with regards to information and also what's going on in the industry, rather than the regulators. But I know that the landscape is changing a little bit now, where I can see that even in Malaysia, our utility, our regulators are also trying to get in front. But I know that most of the times they might not be able to do that because of information. So, do you have any comment on that with regards to the European side of regulation as a regulator? Because I know regulators in Europe is a bit more advanced than where we are on the Far East.
Tricky question, probably. I don't think that the European regulators are trying to be in front. I don't think that the European regulators are trying to be in front of market participants. It's rather we try to gather the information to be prepared once market participants or the market in general come questioning us. Yeah. So we've still a strong principle of let the market develop, yeah, and provide guidance and don't run upfront. But what I see is a kind of change in culture on those digital topics when it comes to the communication between regulators and market participants. So at least, I mean, I come from this market surveillance background, and talking to the big utilities on REMIT, for example, this regulation of market integrity and transparency, there was usually sitting on two opposite sides of the table, frowns on each of our faces, and discussions were rather very limited. Yeah, nobody should interpret what you say wrongly. And with the digital topics, that's completely changed. It's, I would say, it's something new, something interesting for both sides. And at the moment, I still see the phase where we are trying to exchange ideas and understand better. Yeah.
Do you want? Yeah, please.
So maybe just not a real question, but maybe more a suggestion. So with digitalization, it's also a topic for, I think, regulators themselves. So you sit on a big data pool of reported transactions and orders and everything. So you, on your own, also, I assume, have to find solutions how to screen it, how to monitor it, and maybe, and that's this new style of finding ways to have efficient communication between the market and the regulator. So I could foresee that, for instance, all these layers and different shapes and forms of reporting could really change dramatically if you use other technologies like blockchain or other technologies where we as market don't have to send all these data, but you can just grab them from the source.
I completely agree with you. So that's actually part of, it's a bit a mixture of the role of e-control as a company and as a rule maker, so to speak. What you're proposing is actually something we thought of right at the beginning when we understood basically what blockchain technology can achieve. So this idea of having kind of trading blockchain where all the relevant data for you as market participants and for us as regulators is included, where we as regulators have access rights to those bits of the data to which we are entitled. That would definitely simplify the reporting structure, I'd say. So nobody has to send it to an RRM sends it to ACER sends it to us. So a lot can happen along this chain of information exchange, believe me. There's one economically political aspect. If we would now, not so many years after remit reporting, for example, started, go out and tell the market participants, yeah, thank you for the million investments you did in setting up all these reporting cycles, but now we're doing blockchain. Probably that's not what they would like to hear. But anyway, at some point in the future, an update will be necessary of this infrastructure, and I think that would be a good time to think about, could we do it differently and more efficient? Yeah, reducing costs both for regulators but also for the market.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, great. So, please grab it. Yeah.
Our first throw today.
Yeah. Hi, Mark from Delta Connect. We're a RegTech company. We've been talking to the UK regulator, and they got a slightly different view from you. They have to be agnostic to the technology used by market participants. So you can't say, oh, we're going to use blockchain or we're not going to use blockchain, because there are going to be people who won't use blockchain. So you have to be agnostic, surely.
Agnostic in setting the rules, or
no, agnostic in setting the technology. So you say I can get all this data by using blockchain. And what about all the people who don't use it?
I mean, okay, I agree with that point of view when you, for example, prescribe for example, you have interface between various market participant roles. Yeah, and we as a regulator should not say something like you have to communicate via blockchain, probably blockchain run on AWS or Azure Cloud whatsoever. That would be the wrong way. Yeah, but if we getting data from you as market participants, we have to set the interface. We have to tell you which data format. Yeah, and to be technology agnostic. And to overplay it a bit, to be completely technology agnostic, then ACER would never have been allowed to say, send us the remit data in an XML file format. Just send it in any format, in any way you want. But that's, I mean, that's just not possible from a economical perspective or organizational perspective. So what I want to say is, we should not enforce certain technologies for areas where it's not necessary. But for reporting, for example, I mean, it's simply a question of efficiency. And we have to set up our reporting systems, ACER has to set it up, and it has to use a certain technology, and the rest should be able to connect to that. So, I agree, if you say, not everybody wants to join this trading blockchain, there should be an additional interface to that blockchain, but that is within the world of technological possibilities. Just like the smaller market participants nowadays, they are often not directly connected to an RRM. They are using someone else or some special RegTech solution to connect to the RRM.
Yeah, but I could also maybe foresee is, as a German citizen, I have to do my tax return, and I can use Elster online, or I can print it off and bring it to the mail. And maybe we will also see a transition phase where you can offer a regulator to directly access your data sources and less sophisticated participants need to still use the service provider that sends them on behalf of them. But that would really, I think, provide potential to be more efficient on both sides.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe one more question. It's interesting. This event is called European Utility Week, but we have only a utility from Asia here. Is there anybody else? Utility? Ah, great. So you are my next. So please.
Hi, I'm Martin, and I guess to some of you the utility will be somehow known because it's called energy. So it's not a stretch too far. I'm interested, and when we talk about business models, taking into account new fintech solutions, we're usually talking about somehow retail-related topics. So peer-to-peer trading, for example. I'm working in the grid and infrastructure environment, and I would be interested which developments you foresee there and which changes, disruptions of business models you anticipate or have in mind when you think about that.
Disruption is a very dangerous word. I mean, the developments I see at the moment are the developments that all of you see. And there's a representative of that developments here, for example, with Thilo Zimmermann. So there are people trying to employ fintech solutions like Enerchain, like other projects to increase efficiency in the wholesale energy market. But that is taking a well-known process, I would say, simplifying it, making it more efficient. But it's not really something what I would call disruptive. And it's also from a regulatory perspective, it's, I mean, it's business as usual. In principle, you just have to say, is this new construct, whatever it is, this trading blockchain, does it fit into current regulation? And if so, how? Yeah. So other than that, I'd love to hear more disruptive developments in the wholesale energy market for your side, from your side, for example.
So that's a good introduction for Thilo, because I don't know if it works anymore. So Thilo, I would like to ask you to give you a short presentation, and then actually you can, I think, elaborate on your question, because he's more into the operational business. Yeah. So please take the floor.
Okay, good morning. My name is Thilo Zimmermann. I'm Managing Director of Ponton. Before going into my couple of slides, maybe I would like to expand further on your question, because I think it is a very important one. We tend to be, if we've been in the industry a while, I've been doing this for 15 years now, we tend to be focused on the existing business models, the existing data flows, and then something new comes along, and then the question is, all right, how is this relevant to regulation? We should not lose sight of things evolving which are new, which we don't see right now. And one thing I might mention, because I think I didn't have my headphones on, but I think you said something about more on the lines of distribution systems and things of that nature. There are a bunch of research projects about, I can only speak for Germany now, which are being funded partly by the government, because we've started this ambitious process of energy transition to increase drastically the amount of renewables, which creates lots of problems of congestion, capacity, and so we need more flexibility and we need more intelligence in the market. And some of the research projects we are working on or participating in have to do with the fact that these problems which we have to solve today, for instance, northern Germany, lots of wind power, not a whole lot of consumption. The consumption is in southern Germany. How do you make consumers, big industrial consumers, shift their consumption so that we have to have less curtailment of wind power? And also we don't have to spend so much power on building new electricity lines. The system which we have today is very hierarchical. You have the consumer, then you have the DSO, then you have the TSO, there's the big utilities, and somebody making an effort to shift their consumption somewhere in the middle of Germany to avoid congestion in the north of Germany so that the price of power in the south of Germany won't rise so much, the efforts, the benefits, the prices aren't lined up because we have this very hierarchical system. Now, technology, maybe blockchain might help there, but what is really needed is a new approach on the whole network design, the market rules, subsidy structures, how to get a license, regulation. I'm looking over to Clemens. These are issues which to a certain degree aren't even technology related. They're just coming up because technology makes it possible to do something other than the strictly hierarchical model. Okay? But let me start my presentation. So a couple of words on the impact of blockchain on energy trading, and then I'm going to take my crystal ball in hand, which is still sitting right here, and I'm going to give you a view into the future, but mainly focused on the wholesale aspect of it, because that's where we are at home, my company. So blockchain, I mean, still fairly new. I've used this slide a lot. So basically, blockchain does not equal blockchain. It's a bit like saying, how do you use software? Well, of course you do, but what kind of software? There's a big difference between an app on your phone and a sub-system in your financial department. So the key questions to ask are, is it an open blockchain like Bitcoin is, or is it a closed or permissioned blockchain where there is some knowledge of the participants and not just anyone can come in and pop up a node? And to cut to the chase, I think that retail aside, which is not my strength, I must say, it's not my area of expertise, but retail aside, I believe that the energy sector is much more suited to permissioned blockchains, not open blockchains. Second question, which consensus mechanism? If you're running an open blockchain, you're pretty much forced right now with the current technology to use a consensus mechanism along the lines of Bitcoin, which is to say lots of computers trying to solve equations at the same time, and then the lucky guy who gets there first gets the reward, which is a Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency bit. Kind of exciting. I guess the reason for all the hype around blockchain is exactly that, but also hugely wasteful of energy, computing power, and so forth. If you're using a permission blockchain, as you can, I think, in energy in most applications, you don't have to have these wasteful consensus mechanisms. You can use more sensible ones. Which brings up the third question, do we need a cryptocurrency? No, we don't. There's blockchain applications which do wholly without. If you use one of these more sensible consensus mechanisms, you don't have to have it. You could still have a token of value, something which is pegged to the euro, for instance, but that is different from having a free-floating cryptocurrency, which you have to mine for to get it. Okay, and then lastly, financed by an ICO. Well, the big hype around ICOs seems to be going down a bit. We still see it, but that is tied to the idea of a cryptocurrency. So obviously, if you have no other means of funding, then an ICO is for you, but it's not. It doesn't have to be that way, right? You can do it the old-fashioned way by making contracts or by doing an IPO or self-funding or whatever. Okay, so 4 points. What is blockchain good for? And I'm gonna. This is really independent of energy, but I'm gonna give you a couple of examples because we are still in that phase of that hype phase for blockchain, where people are running around with a hammer in hand, and all of the problems look like a nail to them. So blockchain is not the solution to most every question. In fact, the suitable use cases are pretty rare, right? The top one is preventing double spending. Obviously, you have a Bitcoin, you can only spend it once. That's very important, even though you don't have a central bank or central authority. In the case of energy, the example would apply to something like green power. It is virtual. It's a virtual good. You want to prove that you generate this power in a green fashion. And as a producer, you are interested in making sure that nobody else in the market claims to produce green power when they actually haven't. Or they claim to have twice as much volume, which would be double spending. Okay? So there is a number of applications like that in energy. Second one, network effects without monopoly power. What do I mean? certain use cases only make sense when lots of companies are participating. In the case of wholesale trading, obviously, a power exchange is a very good example, or an exchange for gas or for oil. Typically, liquidity gathers at one point, and then the second run, the third run are very small. They almost have no chance of to survive, because the spreads are very small, the liquidity is high, and buying and selling interest tends to go where the others are, obviously. This can't be sorted with blockchain, but blockchain gives you a technology tool to self-commit to not exploit this monopoly power, basically. You can have a distributed governance, you can have a distributed system where there is not a single provider in the middle who can say, well, you did not accept my change of general terms and conditions. Guess what? I just raised the price by 40%. You either pay up or you're out of the market. In a well-designed system using blockchain technology and proper governance, this power simply doesn't exist, which gives trust and confidence that people can participate in something which has strong network effects, but they can be reasonably sure that this power will not be exploited in the future by raising up prices. The third one is a bit technical. Upfront publication, meaning putting data into the blockchain, but in the context of wholesale, this data typically is fairly confidential. So you don't want to publish your portfolio to the world, because then everybody would see that you're long or short in this and that market, and if you're a big player, then that could be exploited. But blockchain offers the tools around cryptography and about protecting your own data, which allow you to do that, but still having ownership and having the confidentiality of the data. And then other services, other app providers can come in and can offer to do stuff with your data. And if you like it, you give them access to your data. And if you don't, you withdraw that access. But you don't have to run a big integration project every time such a new solution comes about. The last one is high resilience at low cost, meaning that I mean, the fact that Bitcoin is still up and running is nothing short of amazing, isn't it? I mean, so much value, so much shady players, so distributed around the world, and yet it hasn't been cracked yet. There have been a number of cases where Bitcoins have been abducted, but those were all on the higher application level, on the wallet level. So the fact that we have the system which is running and running and running without high SLAs and paying millions and millions to some provider is really wonderful. So in terms of having the uptime without spending too much money, it's a good thing. Okay, so lots and lots of applications for blockchain to energy. Since we're on this sort of regulation focused panel here, I just want to point out that in my belief, this new technology applying blockchain to energy is more critical probably on the retail side. Yeah, because on the retail side, you're dealing with less educated people, educated about this thing. The issue of data privacy is much more of a concern, because you're talking millions of people potentially, as opposed to a couple hundred traders who well know what they're doing. The PR effect is also stronger, because obviously no regulator wants to end up on the title page of a newspaper. And lastly, I think these peer-to-peer systems where you have a solar panel here, provider there, and there's a battery over there. Once you store value in the system, I think in the longer run you will have imbalances building up. Somebody will always be producing more energy, and then the question comes up, is this actually like a bank account, or is it more like a miles and more card where you have airplane miles? What happens with this value in 10 years? Is it something which I can pass on to my children if I die? All of these things which don't come up so much between big companies. Okay, so in that way, regulation-wise, I'm very glad that we are very focused on the wholesale markets, and we have nothing to do with retail. So Enerchain is an infrastructure for bilateral trading of energy between big players, essentially smaller players as well, but they have to have master agreements with each other. Yeah, so it's all between legal entities, and it's essentially technical underpinning to a legal process which already exists. That is the OTC bilateral trading. Okay, coming back to my point about permissioned blockchain, couple numbers here. I'm not going to run them off, but I'm making the point here that as far as energy is concerned, if you take retail out of the picture, the numbers we are talking about are a couple of thousand players at most in Europe. So these are numbers which can still easily be handled by a lightweight KYC process, by some authority checking the identity, and off you go, because they already have ERC codes, they have Acer codes and so forth. So there aren't big problems here to translate the already existing identity and trust mechanisms from the energy world into this new technology. Yeah, retail is different, but that's not my area. Consortia. So, I mean, if you do a permissioned blockchain, there's two ways of doing it, right? You can either be a big provider in the middle and you can force this down everyone's throat or make it very attractive. But you are still controlling it. And I know a couple of examples like that in the European marketplace. I'm not going to name them here, but where effectively there is one player and they're running a node, and then they have a distribution system operator, they run two nodes, and then they have an IT provider, they run a reference node. Technically it's a blockchain, but governance-wise they could have just used the database instead, because it's still all in their control. So makes no sense to me if you're making use of the distributed governance. What you need is an actual consortium, not just a technical distribution of nodes. And it's very hard to build these, yeah, because it's a bit like herding cats sometimes. But once it's up and running, it's also very resilient, and it's a very good idea to actually talk to all of them and to keep them on board. So hard to do, but well worth it. And I think a blockchain without the distributed governance is not worth it in my mind. Okay, now here's my crystal ball. The crystal ball is still sitting there, but I can see it, so I can read it off to you. And it's about the future of blockchain in wholesale trading, because that is my area of expertise. Yeah, so I kind of steered around the question of retail, but I think actually that retail offers lots of opportunities as well for this new technology. It's just that I don't believe that a sizable number of end clients are actually willing and interested to deal with these issues. Yeah, speaking personally, I don't even know what my monthly utility bill is. My wife takes care of this. Yeah, I don't know, and I should know, right? But I don't care. And I think that's the way many people feel. So I think in the retail side, we will see service providers, people packaging this and making it smooth and making it transparent. And maybe people will be doing something on a blockchain, but probably they won't even know, yeah, because it's packaged and it's slick somehow. Okay, so first prediction is that trading via blockchain is going to be rather slow in terms of liquidity. I don't think we're going to see more than 10% of the market size in 3 or 5 years' time even. I just don't believe it. It's very hard if you have an existing market to pull this liquidity over. Others tried it, they spent many millions, it's very hard. So I think that the start will be underserved areas of the market, regions without exchanges, maybe combined products, taking weather into account, renewables, or RFQ. You should read products, not products, but RFQ meaning that you can put out your load curve and then people can bid on it. And so that might be more exciting. Secondly, I believe that once the whole thing works in practice, the real value is going to come from post-deal services. Once people are able to project their portfolios onto the system, onto the blockchain, yet keep hold of their data, many new, exciting or existing applications can take hold without forcing you to run big IT projects. And lastly, the killer app. When Steve Jobs was on the stage introducing the first iPhone, he probably did not have the impact on the taxi business in mind. He just, that was not his agenda. But once you have the infrastructure, once you have the interoperability, and once you have data, and once everybody in the market can access it all the time, if you put these 4 ingredients into one pot and stir and let it slowly simmer, you're going to see killer apps. I don't know what these will be, but neither did Steve Jobs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clemens, for your excellent presentation. So I see lots of new people here around. We had a Malaysia utility, a German utility here. I mean, just introducing the people here. You just spoke. That's a lady from the Austrian financial regulator. That's a colleague from the Austrian energy regulator. And here's a colleague, another colleague from a German utility called RWE. So the proposal is here that we try until the coffee break to have a bit of a discussion. I will come after you, don't worry. Yeah. But before I asking my own questions, if you can't hear it very well, there are micros, yeah? So just grab a micro. So we have spoken with 2 utilities. Who else is here in the room? Any fintech starts up guys? IT guys? No. Are you working or are you on holidays here? So who else is here from? Just get an understanding. Who's sitting here? I mean, it's a utility week. No? No? Has anybody any question? IT utility community. You? Sorry?
I'm a PhD student working on an electricity price forecast.
Okay. And do you have any questions or nothing? No? No comments? Oh, really? You're looking quite interested. No, okay, when I will start. Sorry, yeah. I mean, we have a discussion session, yeah, after a coffee break. So come back. And my provocative question to you, Clemens, sorry, Thilo, is blockchain for me is a hype, and nothing else than a communication IT tool to connect A to B or transport data. So what's really new about blockchain? Yeah, what's really the new tool?
Yes, first of all, I couldn't agree more. It is a hype, absolutely. But you know, if you think back some 20 years, there was a big hype about .com, the .com boom, and then the .com bust, and everybody thought this is the end of it. And now, about 20 years later, we have, if you look at the stock exchange, we have Amazon and Facebook and Google and then Apple and then nothing else, basically. So something will change, I think. What is really new about blockchain is the distribution. It is not just communication, but it is the fact that you can have a multilateral system without having a single central player in the middle. That is number one. And number two, again, is the immutability, that you can have the system, you can have a trust, you can have a ledger, which is in no doubt that this is what everybody agreed to, this is what the transaction was. Again, without a bookkeeper, without having a bank saying, yeah, this is your account.
Hello. Thanks for the talk there. My name's Duncan Brown, I'm with Enbala Power Networks. And I just have a question around how does the blockchain consider the physics of the power system? So all the trading happening at the distribution level, does it take into account the active and active power flows in different regions, or how would it manage that?
Well, the blockchain as such, if you think of it of just the lowest tier, which would be Ethereum, for instance, so we're not using that, we're using Tendermint. But that doesn't. But that is a bit like asking, does a database take into account my, I don't know, my spending on my credit card? Well, of course it doesn't. You have to put on a data model, and then you have to have input and access rules. So it's the same with blockchain. Enerchain less so, because the wholesale trading, you're just treating the whole of Austria as Embryon. That is one delivery zone, and you don't care whether it's here or there or over there. It's one TSO. But there are projects underway, and we are quite active in some of them, which deal with, because of congestion, renewables and all that, which deal with geotagging of production and of consumption, so that you could still have a liquid market, but you would know for each bid, for each offer, for each transaction, what the physical reality is, at least in terms of a geo-coordinate, and then that can be mapped onto DSO network levels, and you can have price signals for flexibility, for instance.
Thank you very much.
If you want to go down that rabbit hole, come over to our stand. Yeah.
Yeah. So IT network. Anybody else from around the world or Europe? Do we have actually an Austrian utility here today? No? Also interesting. Clemens, you look like. Do you have any comment? Yeah? Okay.
I want to queue.
You want to queue? Okay.
So actually just having a question on your crystal ball view. So you mentioned you envisage a future without exchanges, and so at least that was, or no, certain regions.
No. What I meant was it's actually quite the opposite. I think it is very hard to go up against exchanges which are working, which have big liquidity, and which have that network effect. What I meant was that there are regions in Europe where there is no exchange, or at least the exchange which there is hardly liquid at all, and it might be easier to establish trading in those underserved regions first.
All right. Anyway, lots of people are claiming blockchain technology solutions could remove exchanges, broker platforms from the picture. I don't share that opinion, but some people do. The question is, do you see it from a technological perspective? Is it possible to replace clearinghouse, some entity which takes care of settlement risk, from the picture?
Okay, two questions for the price of one. Let me just start with the first statement. I don't share the view of these people, whoever they are, that this is going to somehow kill exchanges or brokers. I think the brokers are a little bit more exposed, yes, just because of their business model. But you know, maybe the services they will offer will change somewhat, and maybe their pricing will change somewhat. Everybody will adapt, and that's the way it works. Yeah, but they're not going to go away, because there are very many very valuable services. Market making, sleeve trading, exotic products, and block trading and so forth, which they perform. On to your second question, which was again, sorry?
Just a technological replacement for clearinghouse as an entity taking care of.
All right, so I mean, clearing as a process involves having a CCP at the end of the day, a central counterparty. You have a banking license. You draw on reserves, you make sure everybody is covered and has their reserves there. These are functions which have almost nothing to do with the technology of blockchain. If you need that, or if you want it, or if you want to push away that risk of having credit default, then you will want to use a CCP. Or if in fact EMIR or MiFID regulation forces you, then you will want to use a CCP. And I don't think that the existing CCPs are very keen to write off their investment into the system and go onto this newly untested water. On the short-term trading, that might be a different story, because the balance which you have there, if you're trading intraday and day ahead, is not very high. So I could see a future where there is a blockchain-based system, and there is a token currency, not a cryptocurrency, but a token currency, which is pegged to the euro, say, and then off the system there is a bank or several banks which have running accounts, and they net you at the end of the day, and then you don't have to have clearing if you're willing to accept that risk. That's possible.
Yeah, maybe just to comment on this, can blockchain replace everything? With the credit risk, it's a good example, parts of it. So the settlement process and to instantly settle your exposure that you have to pay, that's, I think, a potential. But the volatility of market prices, if you want to have margin for that, I mean, you can, of course, I think, integrate the services of a CCP into such a technology, but that does only mean that the CCP is using the technology as well.
Yeah, maybe I could jump on that into that as well, because it's of course the same question at the financial market and the CCPs there. And my opposite thesis would also be that exchanges will for longer don't need to be worried about being replaced, because from a technological view, you can of course make processes more simpler and faster and in real time, but when you see it from a functional view, then what the people want finally is to have a claim against somebody. You want to be sure that your order is traded orderly, that there is a counterparty which has certain facilities, which takes the risk, and not only a little technical gadget like a smart contract that robo processes your order, but to have someone who is in charge of that smart contract. And even when we talk about decentralized clearing and settlement, major systems will have, I think, at least someone who is in charge of the smart contracts, who programs them, and who is responsible for that the trading works out well. So as long as there is a need for a legal claim, and that's of course the perspective of a lawyer, there will be central counterparties to address too.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good start. I mean, Biban, as you have started to take the floor, would you be ready to have your slides also?
Sure.
Yeah, and then I think we will continue the discussion, and then Matthias has also some words to say, and then we can have a few of our Q&A. Yeah, thank you.
All right, so hi there again. Bibiane Kaufmann from the Austrian Financial Market Regulator. At first, to be honest, I today felt like a little alien here, seeing all the big utilities firms and providers. But I almost was astonished listening to Clemens, because it really could be also me standing in front of that presentation. It was really impressive that we obviously share, from a regulatory perspective, really the same views on technological neutrality, on the term disruption, on all the hype about blockchain, and even the role of the supervisor. So what I will try to do now is bring in my humble perspective from the Austrian Financial Market Regulator, who is, of course, also in fierce discussions at the moment of all of fintech business models like blockchain and smart contracts. And maybe you are interested how we try to approach fintechs at the moment, and that's what I will focus to not make it too long at present. I think almost since 2010, we recognized more and more requests from market participants, but also from non-licensed companies regarding new business models, planned business models based on new technologies. You know, in 2009, the Payment Services Directive and the Payment Services Act was the first, I'd say, huge scene setter for a fintech law, a fintech directive, because it was all about new payment systems and the first interfaces to existing payment systems. And also this was the time when the phenomenon of crowdfunding emerged and raised question marks above the heads of providers as well as of traditional financial market participants. And my department ever since was in charge of non-licensed activities on the market, which of course primarily consisted in the combat of unauthorized business, but traditionally was the channel to the non-licensed companies. The FMA, of course, supervises its incumbents, but there was no channel for non-licensed companies. And of course, we always had an almost vital interest in regulatory transparency when it comes to keeping off market participants from unintended unauthorized business and our administrative penalty fees. So in parallel to that, our two directors got really, really curious and into all those financial innovation topics. And we were very happy when they came up with the suggestion to establish a Fintech contact point, which shall be an innovation hub in the FMA. So what does that mean? We began conceptualizing it in the year 2015 and established it, launched it 2016, which of course was the year the FCA's, the British regulators' sandbox started, which brought a lot of noise. And we decided to provide the market with an innovation hub that has a perspective internally within the FMA as well as externally. So how does it work? Internally, it shall provide kind of a, let's say, coordinated discussion terrain where we can pull together all the relevant experts from our different divisions, combat against money laundering and terrorist financing, the prospectus supervision, the banking supervision, the market supervision, pull them together on certain fintech issues. We use our advantage as a small authority with short ways, and even at the very basic levels of case handlers, you are, I suppose, rather quick in making meetings and discussing phenomena like, for example, ICOs and crypto assets, because as you can imagine, when such an issue like crypto assets approaches the authority, it comes in a wave where everyone in the first moment is like, oh, I am not the right person for this. Is there any right person for this? And so much time is lost in the first even recognition of a new market phenomenon. We are aware of that as authority, and I think when the market developments go faster and faster, also we have no time to lose on the first recognition of such a phenomenon, but the market wants us quick and wants us precise. So we can use our expert resources within the authority much better when we have this kind of coordination function that the Fintech contact point should establish. And also it should serve as kind of an information distribution carousel. I can tell you at the moment there are, I think, about 6 working groups on the European level only tackling with Fintech issues. And we have discussions on national level, we have national institutions involved, we have even the highest level of policies now thinking about sandbox solutions, also for Austria. And all of that brought new challenges in even bringing together the right person with the right information in the authority. On the other hand, we have an external single point of contact for non-licensed firms that works with regulatory, with regular Fintech meetups that we invite and to, which were very well accepted and frequented since their beginning. We always have around 10 to 15 participants at those network meetings, and the purpose is to update each other on fintech issues, because we know that startups, fintech firms that are non-licensed, lack of approachability to the regulator, as well as we often lack on information on current market developments. So bring that on the same floor, keep each other updated is one of the major functions of this fintech contact point. And of course, we held conferences and workshops in about 1 week at the 19th of November. We will invite to a fintech workshop in the frame of the the Austrian Banking Association, which is the host of the Vienna Fintech Week. So what we try with this is to establish a dialogue also with non-licensed fintechs. But the very core of the fintech contact point is our query system, where every fintech can come up and explain its business model to us and get an integrated answer on regulatory issues. Do I need to be licensed? Do I need a prospectus, a capital, according to the Capital Markets Act? Do I have to observe any money laundering provisions? That's all pulled together and integrated from our experts and answered during this query system without any cost and without any lawyer for fintechs. And we take the information and the cases, the requests that we become from our fintech requests, and take the information out that to wave them into our fintech navigator that we have established on our homepage, which serve as source for all our interpretations on fintech issues. For example, you can look up the recent interpretations from the Financial Market Authority on ICOs, on robo-advice. I think it's been, for about 3 weeks, we uploaded a kind of epical text that concerns itself with ICOs. Yeah, so that's what we did. We tried to establish a new terrain, a new communication channel for fintechs, and also for incumbents who have new business models, and try to be on track with the latest developments. I think I will jump over the next point, the fintech law in Austria. When there is interest in that, of course you can ask me, or we can do it afterwards. But maybe you're more interested in bringing this a little bit down to the blockchain issue. So how does the FMA decide what kind of blockchain models are regulated at the moment and what not? One have to understand that the financial market law is activity and service based. So we always emphasize the technological neutrality as well as the law, as well as of our role. And what we do when deciding over a certain business case is we ask who does what on which instrument. Because there are certain instruments in the financial market law, like credits, savings accounts, or securities, that have consequences that are regulated, that lead to certain services that are provided with regard to them, like brokering or distributing or issuing, are require a license. So so far, the financial market law was used to have central intermediaries and central addresses for requests and for regulation. And of course, what is new now with blockchain and decentralized distributed ledgers is that sometimes such a central counterparty is missing. That's the only reason Bitcoin is not regulated at the moment. There is no central issuer for this token that, of course, has similar functions or the same functions than has a usual means of payment. So we look for the kind of instrument that is provided with a certain coin or token. Is it, from its functionalities, is it a means of payment? Is it just a utilities token? Is it has it the characteristics of a security? And then try to look on the services that are provided with regard to this token. So as a consequence, there are some tokens coin that has to be regulated already under existing financial market law. And there are some systems, like, for example, Bitcoin, that are not. And this is a decision really on a case-to-case basis. We try to give guidance on that in our Fintech Navigator, but can always only be decided on a case-to-case basis. Yeah, what maybe were cases of already regulated models was the whole wave now of ICOs that provided tokens that really actually had the characteristics of securities or investments. In Austria, when you issue a security or an investment, you need a prospectus at least. And if you advise or broker such an instrument, you need a trade license if it's an investment, and you need a license by the Financial Market Authority if it is a security. And whether this is a security or an investment is virally discussed at the moment, not only on national but also on European level. European working groups tackle with this issue and discuss very in deep every small issue of a characteristic of a security at the moment, which is really, really interesting. And we expect the European authorities, the securities regulator, ESMA, at the end of the year to come up with guidance on regulatory issues of ICOs, finally. Yeah, in the meantime, we have to decide on our cases because there are providers which ask us for our guidance and for answer to the requirements, but also providers that don't ask us and start their business without a license and are then kind of shocked when we come along. So this always is, of course, a little bit of a tension when it comes to new market participants, and we try to cope with that by giving the most thorough and most kind of pleasant regulatory transparency and information on that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Biban. Yeah, at first maybe if someone is here in the room who has a question from a colleague, yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Per. I want to ask you about the regulatory compliance with the payments from the bitcoins to a bank in a traditional payment. If you have a payment from the bitcoins exchanged into dollars or anything else, which can be settled in a traditional account, how do you see that at the moment? or how do you handle that? If you don't have any regulation on the bitcoins, how do you handle the firms who are exchanging the bitcoins from the blockchain?
Well, you hear me? Is it on? Okay. The sole exchange of Bitcoin and fiat money is not regulated at the moment.
No.
So if you purchase a Bitcoin, it's like you purchase any other good or commodity. It's not a means of payment, and it's not a security, and it's not an investment. So the sole purchase of a Bitcoin and the sale of a Bitcoin doesn't need to be licensed at the moment. So when you see a Bitcoin ATM, for example, this is not under the supervision of the Financial Market Authority.
Well, but then you have a problem when you with the money laundering. The money laundering will give you a problem, wouldn't it?
Yes, and of course, this is a very interesting point that has been discussed now for about 2 years and led to a financial market regulation of exchanges and wallet providers in the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive. This has to be transposed now in national law till 2020, and we are excited about the consequences to that market, because of course also in Bitcoin you have central intermediaries when you can dock on for regulation, and those are exactly those wallet providers and those exchanges. And they will have to observe KYC procedures and anti-money laundering provisions, and we will see what this will have as an effect.
But the blockchain, does that give the opportunities to give? Does the blockchain gives the opportunities to have that information?
Sorry?
Does the blockchain system gives the opportunity to have that information about the buyer and seller and who is settling the account?
You asked me whether the blockchain has that information. Well, there are blockchains that are totally anonymously, as I've been told. For example, Monero or Zcash. And there are others where you at least can track the IP address if you look it up very thoroughly. But blockchain is, as said before, only the technology. So you, of course, are able to establish a system based on the blockchain, for example, on the Ethereum blockchain, which is used for KYC procedures, because it's especially designed for taking the information of the identity of the customers, and that stores it. That even a whole blockchain is only set up for this purpose, to establish a well-functioned and automatized KYC procedure. So we didn't saw this so far on the Austrian market with Austrian providers, I think, but there are certain tests of digital asset providers that are supervised from us, who wants to establish blockchain solutions to automatize their onboarding of clients and the KYC procedures. Yes.
So before I hand over floor to my colleague Matthias, explaining the opinions of the European Federation of Energy Traders, or essentially the view of utilities on blockchains and its regulation under financial and energy regulation, some last questions for the colleague from, please.
So 2 years ago, when I was visiting Event Horizon 2017, big energy-related blockchain promotion conference, let's call it like that, I met with a startup from Austria And they were very excited, had some questions on the energy regulation, and told me, yeah, recently had an ICO collect a few €100,000. And I asked the guy, oh yeah, and how did you deal with the money laundering provisions? And the answer was, oh, good point, thank you for pointing out that to me. So my question is, what are the biggest mistakes that companies in the fintech or startups in the fintech world are taking at the moment when it comes to new solutions, blockchain?
Definitely starting without consulting us. So I guess most Austrian fintechs that really start providing solutions in a reliable way at the moment either come to us at a very early stage, or they are kind of embedded, integrated in an incumbent's frame. Yeah. So there are not many fintechs that disrupt the market with their business models completely alone. And I think the problem with there being knowledge about regulatory issues was a problem that was really delicate 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. But I think that we and even the market participants and private initiatives like the first Vienna Fintech Association done a good job in trying to tell the market that there may be regulatory issues at every corner of your business model. So in most of the cases, there are requests from which you see at the moment that market participants, young startups are very concerned by regulatory issues already. And that's good because it's of course better we can tell them that nothing has to be observed and no license is required. That's of course what the firms want to hear from us. But when it comes to the other situation where they start and fall into a big shock.
Thank you. So please take the floor, Matthias.
So Matthias Flecke, I'm working as a legal in a utility, actually in the trading house of a utility, RWE by name. And what I'm going to do is I just share some thoughts on a legal perspective to these new tools, IT solutions, and I fully share the view it's really about the activity, it's not so much about the technology for legals to really understand is there anything new to it in my world of regulation and how to fit it into our categories. So if you really look at the use cases, what are energy firms doing and using these new IT solutions, and I avoid by purpose this name Fintech, because I think that is a red herring. We tend to always kind of copy-paste the financial sector and use the same names or terms, but in the end it's, if you like to call it different, Enertech. So it's really just making use of technology for our purposes, and we don't have a real intention to provide financial services. We really stick to our traditional area of finding solutions to trade, supply, market energy. And that's why maybe even we thought in EFED, so in this Federation of Energy Traders, of even eventually changing this name of the working group we have, which is called Fintech, into something else, like Enertech, because it is confusing. And that is maybe even the main purpose, to stress the point that you should not squeeze real economy into the wrong buckets. And if you look concretely on what we have already discussed, what do? We do trade, yes, but we do trade and we trade at exchanges, of course, and we know if you trade as an exchange, then this turns your product, which is an energy product, easily into a financial instrument. But you can also trade bilaterally, and if you trade bilaterally, it's about efficient communication in using new means. And this happens now with, for instance, search and development projects that are at the brink of going live, like EnerChain. And there, of course, you will have, as a legal, always be aware of the delineation between what is really under the control of the peers, and that you don't slip over and go into a world where you create unintentionally an operator that is no longer necessary in such an infrastructure. But there of course, are also, like for me, uncritical parts of such activities which I don't even have to really follow from a regulatory perspective so much. Because everything that you do to just optimize efficiency, in my view, is not a problem, or cannot be a problem for regulatory treatment. So if you really, and that is what also Thilo already mentioned, a big potential to really just optimize your, what you can call back office purposes. And then of course beyond trading, you can also look at other use cases like directly linking generation and consumption. And again, I think that is an area which is, from a regulatory perspective, just has to comply with the regulations that you already know, but there's no additional layer of regulation necessary. And what we have done in this community of EFET is to also really build up knowledge just for us as a community of energy traders and legals that look at it, also in areas that are not the home turf of energy. So what you have described, these tokens, these cryptocurrencies, to my awareness, they are not really used in the moment in the energy sector, but we don't know whether in future they will be used more. And of course there we have to follow also the treatment of such tokens from a financial market perspective. And then, I mean, if you go look further into this categorization of the activities, I think we already have fitting regulation. So if you trade energy products, you have the REMIT regulation, and my comparison would always be only regulate more if you have an additional problem. And for instance, we also, as a FinTech working group, invite service providers and ask questions like, is your service posing a problem with energy consumption? Do you have a validation method that would really cause a big problem if you use it massively with energy consumption? So if you really have a challenge, then do something about it, but don't overdo it. And that's also, again, this area of, you can easily try to say what you do is comparable to insurance or banking activity, and that's why I want to regulate you. And that's maybe this tension that you also have experienced with startups, that they don't want to end up there, but they are unsure about the borderlines. And that's very helpful that, for instance, in Austria, there is this, this interface to really be consulted with. And I think there are also other regulators in Europe that offer that. And that, I think, is very helpful. And then there's this thought of technological neutrality, which I fully share. So if you look at the new means that we use, I think they are about efficiency and to create new means to do the same thing in the end. It's a bit like the old wine in a new bucket, and we shouldn't even be more sexy than in the end the purpose that we serve is. Yeah, and what we have also, I think we haven't talked in the moment about or up to now, about what on the European level is also happening from the side of European Parliament. I think there's also a resolution by the European Parliament that says this new technologies shall be fostered, and there shall be, on the one hand, this neutrality, but on the other hand, there should also be support of such initiatives. And that's where I would also like to start a discussion about things like regulatory sandboxes and how a regulator could enable even projects that by their nature don't fit into the old categories and avoid trying to squeeze them in if they are still in development.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Matthias. Maybe we can have a discussion between us because not many people left here. But I mean, if you would like to ask any questions to the regulators or to us in terms of technology or regulation, please don't shy away. I mean, is there actually anybody from the utility still here? No, it's a funny conference because it's called European Utility Week, but so far we had only a Malaysian, and what was the other? In German, yeah, energy, yeah, exactly. So, okay, coming to you and to your question, I think indeed it would be interesting to learn about what actually, if you take the Enerchain project, whether this is a regulated activity or not, essentially. And maybe Thilo, maybe you can explain it a little bit what this technology is about, and then we can discuss it very shortly when we finish the session. Yeah.
Okay, so we all have a seat, I guess. I think Karl Peter wanted to sit on the outside. But we don't need the slides anymore, so that's fine. I think I'll just want to touch briefly upon two issues which were mentioned. One was the regulatory angle. Why is this an infrastructure for bilateral trading? And the other is the issue of identity and KYC, because one participant asked, wouldn't blockchain system be difficult to have supervision over because it's anonymous, and then you can have money laundering and so forth. I think this is a real issue with some systems, but if you have a permissioned blockchain to begin with, and in particular, if you have a B2B application, a use case, where there are strong linkages to real systems, real companies, real bank accounts, the issue becomes very manageable, because identity needs to be tied to a real life legal identity, technical identity, at the point that we leave the boundary of the blockchain system. Enerchain is limiting itself, or we have limited quite purposefully, to the trading of physical gas and physical power, so that we stay within the boundaries of REMIT, essentially, by design. Yeah, technically speaking, we could have also used it for financial products, but we wanted to leave that outside because it would have just increased the burden. And anyway, the physical markets in Europe are strong enough to support this. So obviously you cannot deliver physical gas or physical power over the blockchain. So somebody needs to be there in the end who makes the settlement, who makes the nomination to the TSO and says, I'm going to be expecting 20 megawatt hours for 2 weeks. And the receiver says, well, or the supplier says, well, I'm going to be supplying that, and then you're balanced and everything is fine. So at this point in time, there is almost like a double check on the permissioning process, because if your EIC code isn't correct, the whole thing wouldn't work. Or if the ASA files which we produce, which people can then send to Acer and hence to eControl and so forth, don't show the right ASA codes, there would be a discrepancy there. So in a permissioned system which is strongly tied into existing processes and systems, I see this as a very manageable issue. And as far as bilateral trading is concerned, like you said, or like Matthias said, it is a more efficient communication mechanism, but there is no central rule setter, there is no central order book, there is no market being created for instruments which weren't there before. It's just that what we have done before, bilateral trading, can now be done more efficiently and quicker, and with less barriers to entry, because I think it is in the interest of energy stability and low prices, which, you know, among fighting market manipulation is also one of the goals of the energy regulation, that there is a secure supply, and this means that also smaller players can enter, and the cost of entry of trading on wholesale is very high today. So if you're a small guy, you're left with giving direct market access to somebody else doing it for you, and the whole idea of having some sort of even playing field goes away. And I think that's a good consequence of a system like this. We shouldn't lose sight of these effects on the actual energy markets by solely being focused on the financial market regulation, which I fully respect, of course.
So I say thank you very much to people who have left already and to people who are still here. Obviously, we are happy to take any question after this session ended. And thank you very much to excellent presentations. And hopefully we will see each other at another conference or discussion again. And yeah, thank you very much.